that stop by.
All the illegal drugs you do in your garage?
Oh, there's no illegal drugs in my garage.
Oh, yes, there is, and there's evidence of it.
Hello there. Hello, darling.
Let me now break a little bit of that glass perspective that most people have when it comes to this verbiage, non-profit. There's a website called ProPublica.org that I've been using for several years now when it comes to some basic research and to align myself with certain criterias when obtaining grants. I want you to keep this in a place that's very pertinent in your mind, so as to corroborate it with other things that we'll be speaking of pretty soon. We'll be using 2 states, for instance, California, Illinois. But of course, you can find this with any other venues, nonprofits in California. The IRS lists 213,750 active tax-exempt organizations operating in California, including 184,330 501c3s. It automatically gives you a distinction between 501c3 and organizations that can be tax exempt here. That's one. So 501c3s are now the confines of exemptions or non-qualification from taxes. So when people speak about taxes being voluntary, whether the form of sales or wage taxes, FICA, state, federal, withholdings, or use or transfer tax, there's an operation of expression as a remedy embedded into the system as to how that works, that most just step over in the journey of them attempting to enforce what they refer to as their right. And as always, you've heard this somewhere else, you've likely heard it here. A right that you don't know how to enforce it is as good as not existing. No different than if you have a good wife in your life. You're as good as not having a wife that is good in your life if you don't know that she's a good wife. No different than having a good husband or a child or a good life for that matter. If you don't consciously, actively recognize that, it is of no use to you. You just exist around it every day and you just walk over it, looking for something that's already in front of you. Same applies with the issue of people referring to taxes. People file taxes over and over and over again, yet there's this thing called tax exemption that never occurs to them to think, okay, there's taxes that's filed. There's taxes based on use. There's taxes based on transfer. There's taxes based on wages called withholding, etc., etc. Yet there's this other dynamic on the corresponding end called tax exemption. Maybe if I look into that, I might get something from it. These tax exempt organizations are the mediums and vehicles to which all these things about taxes being voluntary are enforced. These tax exempt organizations are the mediums and vehicles to which all these things about taxes being voluntary are enforced. No different than saying that you have, quote, civil rights violated. Based on what? The Constitution. You have the 42 USC that says you can bring suits, but it's not self-executing until you claim and assert or attach a constitutional matter or issue with it. No different than if you have any other claims or, quote, cause of action or right of action. You still have to qualify for the standard test and element in order to use it as a vehicle to enforce that thing that you say you have as a cause or a claim. The same applies with the issue of people saying there's something about others digging into the everyday man and woman's pocket. It's called tax exemption, the organization, based on the First Amendment. On a federal level, that is, there's always an equivalence in your state in the Declaration of Right or Bill of Right. And then on a federal level, the Fourth Amendment, security of persons, and the Ninth Intent, the right preserved to the people, respectively. They even give you distinction that there are 213,750 active tax exempt organizations that operates just at California. That's as far as this particular website is able to scrape. Remember, not all tax exempt organizations have to, quote, be registered with the IRS. And that includes, of those 213 that are tax exempt, 184,330 of them are 501c3. In other words, about 29,400 is left that are not 501c3 yet are tax exempt, to which you can make a tax deductible donation. Now, this is another realm, which is the third point when it comes to donations that people use as a medium to not get taxed. Meaning if your monies goes to a tax exempt organization, that thing coming to you is not classified as, quote, income. California nonprofit organization reported $594 billion in revenue in their most recent tax filing, which is the third aspect that I want to bring to your attention. The origin of an entity dictates how and who is able to see what's going on with that entity. The fourth aspect is I want you to put this into perspective. Highest revenue nonprofit in California. Most people usually don't associate this term revenue and nonprofits together in the same sentence or the same thought form, because the assumption is, well, it's nonprofit, so it ought not to have revenue. Wrong. For instance, organization Kaiser Foundation Health Plan, total revenue $82,490,440,881. Billion, not million, not thousand, billion within the fiscal year 2024. Dignity Health, $11,265,480,050. These are billions in revenue, and it goes on and on and on. That's just for California.
The more you give to charity, the richer you get. And what do you find? You find that in subsequent years, when you give $1 to charity, on average, there's about $1.60 that comes back to you in subsequent years. Now, the more you give to charity, the richer you get. And what do you find? You find that in subsequent years, when you give $1 to charity, on average, there's about $1.60 that comes back to you in subsequent years. Now, I was thinking when I first saw this, got to be the hand of God. Nah, it doesn't make sense. I didn't believe it, actually. I thought there was something wrong with my data. And then I was working with this psychologist. I'm an economist. I was working with a psychologist. He says, no, we've been seeing this for years and years. People who give more money away, they get richer. And they make way more money back than that which they give away. And I'm like, what happens is when you give money away, you become a problem solver and your mind changes. You become a more effective person. People who solve problems and give their money away are people who feel more effective. You become a more effective person. People who solve problems and give their money away are people who feel more effective and they earn more money.
Enter Illinois. At Illinois, there's significantly less amount of such types of sheltering and avoidance, not evasion, but avoidance. See, evasion is if you fail to do your accounting and have the proper documentation, which is the key to prove as a preponderance of evidence, and in some cases beyond reasonable doubt, that what you stand on and what you're doing is proper. That's called financial education, which supersedes getting a business degree as a master's and fill in the blank of a certain college. Does not teach you how to be an entrepreneur. Does not teach you how not to qualify for having a golden chain. Does not teach you how to transfer certain substantive information that has existed far beyond what we call modern time, which is post World War I, World War II. In other words, it's existed since the Persian, Akkadian, Sassanid, the Umayyad, even during the King Empire, even during the Mongol Empire when they created the Silk Road, even prior to all those guys, the Babylonian. The concept of tax exemption is not a new thing. The only difference It's the venues and the territories that will put their names in it, but the principles would forever be the same. Ask yourself why certain cultures hold on to religion so tight. Because it has a substance to it that drips into the rest of your life as a ministry. We show this in several videos. Most people have such an end of the extreme where they assume, oh no, taxes is something that you have to pay, and that's it. The first part I agree. If you qualify for it, taxes is based on qualification. And then there's another end of the extreme that says taxes is something you don't have to pay because it's voluntary. Well, the first part I disagree, while I agree with the latter part. Taxes is something that you do have to pay if you qualify for it. If you don't qualify for it, only then is it voluntary. There's a substantive difference in the realm of business when it comes to money compared to personal affairs, which your substance, called constitutionally secured right, First Amendment, religious right to association, and your ability to exercise liberty of conscience of how you connect to a higher power, ought to drip into the first and the second, which is business and personal. In other words, your religious and spiritual affairs in connection to a higher power ought to be your business that eventually your personal life reflects. Once you comprehend that dynamic, life will be so much easier. You don't have to advertise it by telling people what you do know. Just enforce it through proper documentation. That, in my opinion, is where I think some people in the Western world have it figured out than other people in the other part of the world that are extremely religious, that will give their life to Jesus or fill in the blank of whatever they got going on. Yet they are suffering. Yet they're living in poverty. The wealthiest people know how to use religion beyond dogma, beyond mere naked hate and assumption of simply being better because they say praise, fill in the blank of whoever your prophet is. Religion is a tool no different than a piece of clothing you put on you to protect the integrity of your health, reputation, self-esteem, and civility. That's the purpose of religion. Of course, it can be used for more than that. If you look at how people and administrations have used the concept of religion since time immemorial. But as for the average everyday man, use religion as a tool to clothe your lifestyle so that you don't continuously become a slave. Not get on the end of the extreme of the bandwagon to say, oh no, you must pay tax, or no, you can't and you're not supposed to pay tax. No, neither is correct. It's the balance of qualification. But how would you know about qualification without competence? Well, start with the basics. Observe the things going on around you. We've shown California, Illinois, for instance, nonprofits in Illinois. The IRS lists 78,966 active tax-exempt organizations operating in Illinois. That is what they just list. Including, meaning part of that 78,966 are 60,898 501c3s that are considered tax-exempt. In other words, once more, to reiterate, to emphasize, there are other types of entities that are tax exempt that are not 501c3s, to which you can make tax deductible donations. Illinois' nonprofit organization reported $180 billion in revenue on their most recent tax filing. To emphasize once more, the origin of the entity to which you create your own association, either it's incorporated or otherwise, will determine who you are beckoning to when it comes to providing reports. We've entertained that in all these other videos. Northwestern Memorial Healthcare, $10,054,188,947 just within the fiscal year. And then you see all these other entities. University of Chicago, $4,888,334,650. All these humanitarian causes, all these educational research and development based entities. Know something about religion that most people don't connect. People go to these entities and universities to become a slave by spending time, to be groomed, to only be able to think for someone else and be used by someone else perpetually. Just follow along someone else's shadow who's prepared to use their time, use their mind, and tell them this is what you're worth, so long as they get the perception of freedom. Yet they fail to stop and observe what these entities that are grooming them actually stand for. And we are in the age of technology. There's no excuse for people to not be aware of how these things work. Keep these basics dynamic in mind, because soon enough, I'll be showing you the power of grant. This is just tax deductions that people who are giving money to these entities are using as shelters. And these are the ones that are filed and recorded. Grants is another realm, but the concept of taxation and deductions exists that you can implement into something called a financial statement, which I've shown. How many beautiful women or handsome men you have sex with. When it comes to the concept of entities, it's about how you organize your documents. And there's a realm that still is hidden to the everyday man that I think is important to emphasize to the everyday man, because they are the ones suffering from this. Yet the system exists in abundance as an available thing for them to use. Financial statement is simply the summary of the true health that the world cares about when it comes to your entity. Just like you figure out your health by looking at the way you feel when you wake up at the end of the day, in the middle of the day, by looking at the contents and colors of your eyes, your lips, your skin. Well, the same thing is observed when it comes to the business world and entities. The way the health is looked at is called the financial statement. That's what anyone gives a fuck about, if I'm being very curt with you. No one cares about the lexicons you have in your mind that you can use. No one cares about how expensive your coat is. No one cares about how expensive your underpants is. How many beautiful women or handsome men you had sex with. When it comes to the concept of entities, it's about how you organize your documents. And there's a realm that still is hidden to the everyday man that I think is important to emphasize to the everyday man, because they are the ones suffering from this. Yet the system exists in abundance as an available thing for them to use. Hey, I'm inviting you to come join the patron page. Not only do you get access to documents, posts, and videos that you will never find on any other platforms, you also get instant access to webinars that otherwise will cost far more. And we speak of things that usually we would not be able to speak of on any other platforms far more freely. On top of that, you get the opportunity to send me monthly questions.